For 20 years, my sister Sarah blamed me for ruining our family, and I believed her. Then I found an old roll of film that proved she wasn't just a liar. She was an accomplice to a federally wanted criminal. The official story, the one that became the gospel truth at every Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving argument, was that I, at the rebellious age of 14, single handedly detonated what was meant to be our last perfect family vacation. The year was 1998. We were in a beautiful, remote national park, a place of serene lakes and towering pines. My supposed crime? I lost the keys to our rental car, a simple, stupid teenage mistake. But in Sarah's retelling, this act of carelessness was a malicious strike against family harmony. She painted a picture of me as a sullen, selfish brat who, in a fit of pique, threw the keys into the woods, stranding us for 2 days, causing us to miss our flight home, and forcing my dad to spend a fortune on last-minute arrangements. My protests that I'd just misplaced them were drowned out by her dramatic sighs and the narrative she so skillfully wove. A narrative of a good family being sabotaged from within by its broken son. This story isn't just about a lie, it's about how a single, forgotten object can rewrite your entire life. It gets pretty intense, so if you're into stories of long overdue justice, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next. Over the next 2 decades, that incident became my identity. It was the anchor that Sarah tied to my leg every time I tried to swim. When I dropped out of my first college major, it was because, as Sarah would remind our parents with a sad shake of her head, I'd always struggled with responsibility. When a long-term relationship of mine ended, she'd whisper to my mom that maybe I was just not built for commitment, hearkening back to how I'd committed to ruining their vacation. She wasn't loud or aggressive about it. Her methods were far more insidious. It was the art of the concerned tone, the gentle hand on my mother's arm as she delivered another psychological blow. She was a master of turning my parents' love for me into a weapon of doubt. I learned to live with it. I stopped fighting back years ago because every denial was just more proof of my guilt. "See how defensive he gets?" she'd say softly. "He still can't face what he did." So I just absorbed it. I became the quiet, disappointing son. I'd sit at family gatherings, a ghost at the table, just trying to be as small and unobtrusive as possible. The weight of that lie was immense. It shaped my perception of myself. I started to believe it, to see myself through their eyes, unreliable, flawed, the source of the family's first real crack. My relationship with my parents became a landscape of careful conversations and unspoken disappointments. I loved them, and I think they loved me, but our connection was permanently filtered through the lens of Sarah's story. Just last month at my dad's 70th birthday, she did it again. Someone had brought up a funny travel story, and Sarah let out a little tragic laugh. "Well, we all know who not to put in charge of the car keys," she said, winking to make it seem like a lighthearted joke. The rest of the table chuckled politely, but I saw the familiar look in my parents' eyes. It was a flicker of pain of that old memory. And in that moment, sitting there as a 34-year-old man, I felt the same helpless, suffocating shame I felt when I was 14. I felt broken. I went home that night feeling a level of despair I hadn't felt in years. I was trapped in a past that wasn't even real, and I was convinced I would be trapped there forever. I had no idea that the key to my freedom was sitting in a dusty box, undeveloped for over 20 years, waiting to expose a truth far darker than the lie I'd been forced to carry. A week after my dad's birthday party, I was still in a fog. My parents called, asking if I could help them clear out their garage over the weekend. They were downsizing. I agreed immediately, not out of duty, but out of a desperate need for a distraction. I needed a mindless physical task, something to stop my brain from replaying that humiliating moment at the dinner table over and over again. The garage was a tomb of forgotten hobbies and outdated technology, thick with the smell of old oil, damp concrete, and decaying memories. For hours, I just worked, sorting through rusted tools and stacks of old magazines, losing myself in the rhythm of the labor. I was in the far corner, covered in dust and sweat, when I came across a stack of cardboard boxes. My name was written on the top one in a thick black marker, the handwriting a clumsy teenage version of my own. My stuff, keep out, it declared. A faint smile touched my lips. I cut the old tape and opened it, expecting a wave of cringy nostalgia. Inside was a time capsule from the late 90s, a stack of CDs from bands I'd long forgotten, a faded ticket stub from my first concert, a worn-out video game controller. It was a collection of relics from a boy I barely remembered being, a boy who existed before the infamous vacation, before Sarah's lie had calcified into family history. And then I saw it, buried at the bottom beneath a rolled-up poster. A cheap plastic point-and-shoot camera. It was a simple Kodak, the kind you'd buy for a school trip. I remembered saving up for weeks to buy it. I ran my thumb over the worn plastic, a ghost of a memory flickering in my mind. On a whim, I popped open the film door on the back, expecting it to be empty. It wasn't. A small brown roll of Fuji film was nestled inside. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the little exposure counter window. The number inside was 24. A full roll, shot but never developed. My heart hammered against my ribs. 1998. The National Park. This was the camera I had taken on that trip. For 20 years, I had believed there was no proof, no way to ever challenge the story that had defined me. But now I was holding a small plastic box that contained 24 silent witnesses from the past. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't shame or resignation. It was hope. A dangerous, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth was about to come out. The next morning, I couldn't even think about work. That little roll of film felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. I found one of the few places left in the city that still developed 35mm film, a small, dusty shop run by an old man who seemed surprised to see someone under 60. He told me it would take a day. That 24-hour wait was one of the longest of my life. I paced my apartment, my mind racing with possibilities. I imagined a photo of me putting the car keys on the picnic table, or a shot of Sarah playfully hiding them. All I needed was one frame, one piece of objective truth to dismantle the fortress of lies she had built around me. When I finally picked up the small envelope of glossy prints, my hands were trembling. I didn't even wait to get back to my car. I sat on a nearby park bench and tore it open. The photos spilled into my lap, bright squares of a life I'd almost forgotten. There we were, my dad, younger and smiling, proudly grilling burgers. My mom, her arm around me, squinting in the sun. A goofy, out-of-focus selfie I'd taken. I shuffled through them eagerly, my heart sinking with each picture. They were just normal family photos. There was no smoking gun, no shot of the keys, no evidence of anything, just memories. A wave of crushing disappointment washed over me. It was a dead end. I was about to stuff them back into the envelope when I decided to look through them one more time, more slowly. That's when I noticed it. It started with a photo of my mom and me by the lake. In the background, leaning against a tree, was a man. A tourist, I assumed. Then I saw another picture, this one of Sarah, supposedly taking a photo of our campsite. But her gaze and the angle of the camera she was holding in the shot, I must have taken that one, were aimed slightly past the tent, towards the same man who was now walking along a trail. My blood went cold. I laid out all 24 photos on the bench. In 9 of them, there he was. Never the main subject, always lurking in the background or on the edge of the frame. And in every single one, Sarah was either looking in his direction or was the one who had clearly taken the photo, framing the shot to include him. She wasn't documenting our family vacation. She was documenting him, a complete stranger. The disappointment I'd felt moments ago was replaced by a deep, chilling confusion. Who was this man? And why was my sister secretly, obsessively photographing him? Back in my apartment, the park bench confusion morphed into a full blown obsession. I cleared my coffee table and laid out the 9 photographs in chronological order, like a detective mapping out a crime scene. For the rest of the day and deep into the night, I just stared at them. My world shrank to the glossy surfaces of those 4 6 prints. The man was of average height and build, with dark hair and a plain face that was frustratingly hard to pin down. In every picture, he looked tense, anxious. He was never smiling, and his eyes were always scanning his surroundings, as if he were looking for something or someone. My initial hunt for evidence to clear my name was completely forgotten. This was something else entirely. This wasn't about car keys anymore. What was my sister, a 17-year-old girl on a family trip, doing secretly documenting this paranoid looking stranger? I scanned the best photo of him at the highest resolution my printer could handle and blew it up on my computer screen, pixel by pixel. I examined every detail. The brand of his hiking boots was too generic. The watch on his wrist was a cheap digital model with no distinguishing features. His clothes were plain, jeans and a dark t-shirt. But then I saw it. On the t-shirt, there was a faint logo over the chest pocket, blurred by the low resolution of the old film. It looked like a stylized mountain with a bird flying over it. It was a lead, a tiny, fragile thread to pull on. For the next few hours, I was glued to my screen, frantically searching for mountain bird logo, outdoor gear 1990s logo, and 100 other variations. I found nothing. It was likely a small local brand that had gone out of business decades ago. A dead end. Frustration gnawed at me. I leaned back, rubbing my tired eyes, and looked at the photos again. It wasn't just the logo, it was his whole demeanor. The way he stood apart from the other tourists, the way he never seemed to relax. He looked like a man with a secret. And whatever that secret was, my sister was a part of it. I knew then that I wouldn't be able to sleep, to work, to live, until I found out the truth. My life, which had been defined by a lie for 20 years, was now consumed by a mystery. My obsession with the photographs drove me deeper into the digital rabbit hole. The logo search had been a bust, so I decided to escalate my methods. I spent an entire afternoon using various online tools to enhance the clearest photo of the man's face. I sharpened the image, adjusted the contrast, and did my best to correct the grainy quality of the old film. The result was still a blurry, indistinct face, but it was the best I was going to get. With a surge of nervous energy, I uploaded it to several facial recognition websites, the kind that claim they can find anyone by scanning social media profiles, news articles, and public records. I watched as the progress bar slowly crawled across the screen. My heart was pounding. This felt like a modern magic trick. A ghost from 1998 was about to be given a name by an algorithm in 2025. One by one, the results came in. No matches found. The image quality is too low for an accurate search. We could not identify this person. The technology of the present couldn't penetrate the shadows of the past. The man remained a phantom. I refused to give up. I changed my tactics. If I couldn't find him, maybe I could find the event. I spent the next 2 days combing through digitized newspaper archives from the area surrounding the national park, focusing on the specific week of our vacation in 1998. I searched for everything I could think of: missing person, accident, theft, police search, strange incident. I waded through hundreds of articles about local town fairs, high school sports results, and public service announcements about fire safety. It was a tedious, mind-numbing process. There was a brief mention of a bear sighting near one of the trails, but absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that would explain a nervous-looking man and a 17-year-old girl taking his picture in secret. It was as if he and whatever he was doing there had left no trace at all. The lack of any information was almost more unnerving than finding something terrible. It meant that whatever was going on was happening quietly, deliberately kept out of sight. My digital investigation had hit a solid brick wall. The ghost in the photographs remained nameless, and I was no closer to understanding my sister's secret. Days blurred into a single, frustrating haze. My apartment had become a chaotic den of obsession, with the 9 photos pinned to a corkboard like evidence in a police thriller. I had exhausted every digital avenue I could think of. The man in the pictures remained a ghost, and I was on the verge of giving up. Defeated, I slumped into my chair, staring at the board. I had looked at these images so many times that they felt meaningless. The faces and landscapes, nothing more than patterns of color. I was ready to accept that I would never know the truth, ready to take the photos down and surrender to the lie once more. My eyes drifted aimlessly over the board. I wasn't searching anymore, just looking. I glanced at one of the grainier photos, one I hadn't paid much attention to, because the man's face was mostly obscured. In the shot, he was reaching for a water bottle on a picnic table. His sleeve was slightly pulled up, exposing his wrist. It was probably nothing, just like everything else. But I couldn't shake a feeling. I unpinned the photo and took it to my desk, grabbing an old magnifying glass from a drawer. I held the glass over the man's wrist, and the blurry, grainy image swam into focus. At first, all I saw was the pixelated texture of the photo paper. But then, I saw it. Partially hidden by the strap of his cheap digital watch was a tattoo. It was small, no bigger than a coin, and the details were faint. But it was unmistakable. It was a snake, coiled into a perfect circle, devouring its own tail. An Ouroboros. Jolt, electric and sharp, shot through me. My exhaustion vanished, replaced by a surge of pure adrenaline. This was it. This was the detail that could change everything. It wasn't a generic logo or a forgettable face. It was a specific, deliberate, and searchable symbol. The digital ghost suddenly had a fingerprint, and I knew exactly what to search for next. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my mind laser focused on the new lead. The Ouroboros. I typed Ouroboros Tattoo Man, won at 1998 into the search bar and hit enter. At first, the internet gave me nothing but noise. The results were a chaotic mix of mythology websites, articles about ancient symbols, pictures of modern jewelry, and forum discussions about tattoo designs. It was a digital haystack, and I felt a familiar pang of frustration. I was so close, yet the truth was still buried under layers of irrelevant data. I realized I needed to be more specific. I narrowed the search, adding the name of the national park and the state. I tried different combinations. Man with snake tattoo missing person, fugitive 1998 park search. For what felt like an hour, I clicked through dead ends and empty links. And then I saw it. It wasn't a major headline from a national news outlet. It was a tiny, obscure link deep on the 5th page of the search results. A link to a scanned archive of a small local newspaper, the Pine Valley Chronicle, dated August the 12th, 1998, the exact week of our vacation. The headline was simple: Authorities widen search for investment firm fugitive. My breath hitched. I clicked the link, and a poorly digitized black and white page loaded on my screen. The picture was grainy, a photocopy of a driver's license photo. But even with the terrible quality, there was no doubt. It was him, the man from my photographs. His name was Julian Croft. The article described him as a junior partner at a prestigious investment firm who had vanished a month earlier. He wasn't just a man in trouble, he was accused of embezzling over $2 million from a teacher's pension fund. He had stolen the life savings of hundreds of hardworking people. The article detailed how he had systematically siphoned the money over a year, leaving behind a trail of financial ruin and betrayed trust. And then I read the sentence that made the floor drop out from under me. It was part of the physical description provided by law enforcement. Subject is 5 to 10. Brown hair, brown eyes, and has a distinctive tattoo of a snake eating its own tail on his left wrist. The world tilted on its axis. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a teenage crush. This was real. Suddenly, fragmented memories from that trip, moments I hadn't thought about in 20 years, started snapping into focus with terrifying clarity. Sarah's sudden, frequent headaches that made her stay behind at the campsite while we went on hikes. Her borrowing the car for what she claimed was a trip to the only payphone in the area, a 20-mile round trip to call a friend. The massive argument we'd had the day before the keys went missing, which she started because I'd almost stumbled upon her while she was supposed to be resting in her tent. At the time, I thought she was just being moody. Now I realized I had likely almost walked in on her meeting with him. And then the final devastating piece fell into place. The keys, the foundation of my 20-year shame, the incident that branded me as the family screw-up. What if I hadn't lost them at all? What if she had taken them? It made perfect, sickening sense. Croft needed to get away. The authorities were closing in. She needed a diversion, a big one. A family crisis so dramatic and all-consuming that no one would notice her slipping away to help him, or question why she seemed so distracted and anxious. She needed a scapegoat. She didn't just lie to cover up a crush. She orchestrated a psychological drama, framing her own 14-year-old brother to create a smokescreen for a federal fugitive. She had watched me take the blame, watched it corrode my relationship with our parents, watched it define my entire life, all to protect him. The anger I expected didn't come, not yet. Instead, a strange, icy calm washed over me. The shame that had lived inside me for 2 decades evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. This was so much bigger than a ruined vacation. This was about a lifetime of manipulation built on a foundation of serious crime. And I finally had the truth. For a full day, I did nothing. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even leave my apartment. I just sat with the terrible, liberating truth. The newspaper article was still open on my computer screen, Julian Croft's grainy face a permanent fixture in my vision. The icy calm I'd felt upon discovery had settled deep into my bones, hardening into something else. Resolve. The anger was there, a white-hot furnace burning deep inside me, but it was a controlled burn. For 20 years, Sarah had played a long, slow game of psychological warfare. A loud, messy confrontation would be a betrayal of the suffering I'd endured. Yelling at her, exposing her in a burst of fury in front of our parents. That would just create another explosion, another family drama she could manipulate and twist to her advantage. She would paint me as unhinged, as someone dredging up a fantasy to hurt her. No, my response had to be as quiet, as precise, and as devastating as the lie she had crafted. My goal wasn't to send her to prison or to blow up my family. My parents were old. The full truth about their daughter being an accomplice to a felon would shatter them. My goal was simpler and far more personal. I wanted my life back. I wanted her to look me in the eye and know that I knew. I wanted to dismantle the power structure she had so carefully built, brick by brick, lie by lie. I didn't want an apology. I wanted her to live in the quiet terror of knowing that her entire world rested on my silence. The punishment wasn't going to be a public shaming. It was going to be a lifetime sentence of looking over her shoulder, wondering when or if I would ever tell. The plan began to form, not in a flash of inspiration, but in a slow, methodical process. The photos were my weapon, but the cheap, glossy prints from the corner store wouldn't do. I needed them to be perfect. I took the original negatives to a professional photo lab in the city, the kind that artists and photographers use. I paid extra for high-resolution scans and premium archival prints of the 9 key photographs. I wanted every detail to be pristine. The anxiety in Julian Croft's eyes, the secret, adoring glances from my sister, the damning tattoo on his wrist. When I picked them up 2 days later, they were heavy in my hands, the paper thick and expensive. They no longer looked like faded memories. They looked like exhibits of evidence. Next, I needed the right stage. Mailing them was too anonymous, too cowardly. I had to deliver the blow myself, but without saying a word. I checked the calendar. There was a family dinner planned for the following Sunday at my parents' house. It was perfect. A family dinner was her preferred theater of cruelty, the place where she most enjoyed reinforcing my role as the family failure. This time, however, there would be a new act in the play, and she wouldn't be the one directing it. I bought a simple, plain manila envelope. I slid the 9 photographs inside, in a carefully chosen order with the clearest shot of her looking at Croft right on top. The envelope felt heavier than a brick. For the rest of the week, I practiced being calm. I went to work, I talked to friends, I went through the motions of a normal life, all while this silent, ticking bomb sat on my desk. I was no longer the victim of her story. I was the author of its final chapter. The drive to my parents' house felt different this time. Usually it was a journey into anxiety, my stomach tightening with every mile. But that Sunday, I felt a profound, almost unnerving calm. The manila envelope was on the passenger seat next to me, a silent, unassuming passenger holding 20 years of truth within its folds. When I walked in, the familiar scene greeted me. The smell of my mom's roast chicken, the sound of a sports commentator murmuring from the TV in the living room, and Sarah already there, holding court in the kitchen, a glass of wine in her hand. She gave me her usual smile, the one that was a little too bright, a little too condescending. "Look who made it," she said. "Don't worry, I hid the car keys." I just smiled back, a real placid smile, and said, "That's probably for the best." Her own smile faltered for a second, confused by my lack of a reaction, before she turned back to my mom. Dinner was a slow-motion play I had seen 100 times. We talked about my dad's garden, a cousin's new baby, the rising price of gas. I ate my food, listened, and said very little, a quiet observer. I could feel Sarah watching me, trying to figure out my new demeanor. My calmness was unsettling to her. It was a disruption of the natural order of our toxic relationship. She needed me to be the brooding, resentful brother to fuel her own sense of superiority. Finally, as my mom brought out the dessert, Sarah saw her opening. My dad was telling a story about a road trip he'd taken in his youth. "Speaking of trips," Sarah began, letting out a little theatrical sigh, "it's a shame we can't all look back on our family vacations so fondly." The table went quiet. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. My dad's smile faded. This was it, her favorite scene. "I mean, most families have photo albums," she continued, her eyes landing on me. "All we have is the memory of being stranded for 2 days because someone couldn't handle a little responsibility." This was my cue to get angry, to deny it, to start the fight she so desperately wanted. Instead, I did nothing. I took a slow sip of my water, held her gaze, and didn't say a single word. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. It was her move, and she had made it. Now it was mine. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket. Every eye at the table followed my hand. I pulled out the manila envelope and placed it on the table with a soft thud. I slid it across the polished wood, a smooth, gliding motion, until it stopped directly in front of her plate. "What's this?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Finally writing me a formal apology?" She laughed, but it was brittle. My parents looked on, completely bewildered. I just gave a slight nod, encouraging her to open it. With a defiant smirk, she picked it up and flipped open the flap. The first photo was on top, A high-quality print of her, 17 and unaware, aiming her camera not at the beautiful scenery, but at the tense, anxious man in the background. Her smirk vanished. Her face went blank with confusion. She pulled out the next photo, and the next. Her hand began to tremble. I could see the subtle shift as her brain processed the images. Her confident posture wilted. The color drained from her face, leaving a pale, sickly mask. Her eyes, wide with dawning horror, darted from the photos to my face and back again. She was shuffling through them faster now, desperately, as if the next one would somehow make it all go away. Then she reached the final photo, the one I had placed at the bottom. The one with the close-up of Julian Croft's wrist, the Ouroboros tattoo clear as day. A small, choked sound escaped her throat. "Sarah, honey, what is it?" my mom asked, her voice filled with concern. Sarah didn't answer. She looked up and her eyes locked with mine. In that moment, the entire world fell away. There was no one else in the room. In my eyes, she didn't see anger or triumph. She saw a mirror reflecting the truth she had buried for 2 decades. She saw that I knew. I knew everything. The power dynamic of our entire lives shattered in that silent 5-second stare. Panic took over. With clumsy, fumbling fingers, she shoved the photos back into the envelope, scraping one against the table. I don't feel well," she stammered, pushing her chair back so violently it almost tipped over. "I have a migraine. I have to go." Before my parents could even react, she was gone, snatching her purse and practically running out the front door. The sound of her car speeding away down the street echoed in the stunned silence of the dining room. In the deafening silence that followed Sarah's chaotic exit, my parents just stared at the empty doorway and then at me. My mom, her face etched with worry, finally broke the silence. "What was in that envelope? What on earth just happened?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I looked at the two of them, the parents I had felt so distant from for so long, and I made a choice. I could have told them everything, shown them the photos, and destroyed the image of their daughter forever. But that was never my goal. "It was just something from a long time ago that Sarah and I needed to resolve," I said calmly, collecting the envelope from the table. "Don't worry about it. It's over now." They were confused, I could tell, but they also saw a strength in me they hadn't seen in years, and they didn't press the issue. The days that followed were quiet. Sarah didn't call. She didn't text. For the first time in my adult life, there was no passive-aggressive email, no manipulative message sent through our parents. There was just silence. The weapon she had used against me for 2 decades had been disarmed, and without it, she had nothing to say. A week later, my mom called to say Sarah had apologized to them for her bizarre behavior, blaming it on a bad mix of medication and a terrible migraine. It was a weak, pathetic lie, and we all knew it. But it was also a white flag, a signal of her unconditional surrender. Life since that dinner has been profoundly different. The weight I carried on my shoulders for 20 years is gone. I feel lighter, freer. My conversations with my parents are no longer filtered through the lens of my past failures. We're getting to know each other again, on new, more honest terms. I've started new projects, pursued hobbies I'd long abandoned, and feel a sense of optimism about the future that I thought was lost forever. Sarah and I still see each other at major family events, but the dynamic is completely changed. The snide remarks are gone. The knowing, condescending looks are gone. Now she barely meets my eye. She lives in a quiet, self-imposed prison, knowing that I hold the key and could unlock the door at any moment. But I never will. Her punishment is living with the knowledge of what she did, and knowing that I know. I chose a quiet victory over a loud, destructive war. I didn't expose her to the world, or even to our family. I just took back the power she had over me. So now I have to ask you, did I do the right thing? Or should I have exposed her for everything she did, no matter the consequences? What would you have done in my place? If you want to hear more stories about long overdue justice and complex revenge, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single one. And if you think my sister got what she deserved, hit that like button. Let me know your answer to my question in the comments below. I'll be reading them.